Hilchos Maaser Sheini v'neta Rabbi Perek Shlishi, the laws of the second tithe and the produce of the fourth year, chapter 3. We've defined what Maaser Sheini is. It's the 10% that you take from the produce that belongs to you. It doesn't belong to the Kohen, to the Levi, it belongs to you, but it has to be treated in a holy way in which you have to eat it in Yerushalayim. So today, this chapter is going to be dealing with how Maaser Sheini may not be consumed in different states, ritual impurity, mourning, and also how Maaser Sheini should be consumed, in which ways it's allowed to be used and which ways it's not allowed to be used. And the Rambam begins the following. Halacha Aleph, ha'oichel Maaser Sheini betuma. If somebody eats Maaser Sheini produce in a state of ritual impurity, loike, he gets lashes. It's literally a biblical prohibition. Shenemar, because it says, part of the declaration that the person makes, as we're going to learn in the end of these laws, every couple of years you have to make a declaration that you gave all the Maaser properly. And one of the things that you say was, I didn't consume it in a ritually impure state, which means that it's forbidden to do so. And impure goes both ways. So you look at the screen, red represents impure and the green represents pure. So the Rambam says, Bein sheha Maaser tameh v'ha'oichel taher, whether on the left side, the bread is impure and the person is pure, Bein sheha Maaser taher v'ha'oichel tameh, or the bread is pure, you're the one who's impure. Either way constitutes eating Maaser Sheini in an impure state. V'hu sheyechlenu b'Yerushalayim kaidem sheyipadeh. But the biblical obligation only comes if you ate it in Yerushalayim before it was redeemed. It wasn't transferred yet to money. You only get lashes for eating it in an impure state if you eat it in the place where it's supposed to be eaten. But if you ate it in a state of impurity outside of Jerusalem, you don't get biblical lashes, you only get rabbinic lashes. Halacha Beis, Maaser Sheini, when it becomes impure, is even stricter than Truma when it becomes impure. Even to use it to fuel a lamp. Here's my lamp. Sorry, my computer's a little bit messed up today on the other side. The lamp, you cannot use oil of Maaser Sheini, which became impure, to feed the lamp. Also, it's forbidden until you redeem it. Shenemar, because it says, Lo vi'arti mimenu b'tameh. I didn't consume it in an impure state. The word bi'arti also has the word bi'ur, burning. I didn't even burn it in an impure state. Halacha Gimel, Kvar Beyarnu, we already explained yesterday, Sheha Maaser Shenitma, that when Maaser Sheini becomes impure, Afilu b'Yerushalayim, even if it becomes impure once you already brought it to Yerushalayim, Poidin v'yei achel. You have to redeem it, in other words, transfer the holiness onto money, and then you can eat the original produce in a state of impurity. The oichlin as dam of betara, beteiras peiras Maaser kameshi yizbar, but the money, which you just transferred the holiness, has to be eaten in a state of purity. Treat it like Maaser Sheini, kameshi yizbar, as will be explained in later chapters. Afilu nitmu apeiras kulan keshehin tevel. Even if the entire produce became impure while it was untied, you hadn't even separated Maaser Sheini yet. Mafrish Maaser Sheini betuma, you must separate the Maaser Sheini in an impure state, upaidehu, and then redeem it later or transfer it to the money, because you have an inherent obligation to separate Maaser Sheini. Halacha Dalit, ha'orel katame. Interestingly, for these laws, a Jew who doesn't have a bris is considered like impure. V'im achal Maaser Sheini loike min atayra. If he ate second tithe produce, he gets lashes biblically. Kaderech shaloike al achilas truma. The same way he gets lashes for eating truma. How do I know? So here we have what's called the Gzeira Shava. Gzeira Shava means that the same word appears in two different contexts. Shahat truma kruya kaidesh. Truma is called holy. That's in this verse up here. It says v'chol zar lo yochal kaidesh, toshav kayin v'sacher lo yochal kaidesh. Kaidesh over here is referring to truma. Maaser Sheini karui kaidesh. And the second tithe is also called holy. By divine providence, this was yesterday's reading of the Torah. Shaharei nemar ba, it says by Maaser Sheini, literally yesterday's parsha, kaidesh lashem. Maaser Sheini is holy to God. So now you have holy by Truma, holy by Maaser Sheini. The same way by Truma, it says clearly that an uncircumcised person cannot eat the Truma, so to over here, he also can't eat Maaser Sheini. V'tamei shetoval, if an impure person goes to the mikvah, so usually when it comes to Truma, let's say, you have to also wait the whole day till sunset, or till Tzitz HaKochavim, when the stars come out, and then you can eat Truma. But here, when it comes to Maaser Sheini, oichel Maaser Sheini afal pi sheloi hariv shimshai. You can eat Maaser Sheini even if the sun did not go down. Halacha hey, this is a very interesting halacha. Ha'oichel Maaser Sheini ba'aninus shel Torah. A person eats Maaser Sheini in a state of biblical aninut. Aninut is a high level of mourning. We're going to soon define it in a second. Loike. Here it is. You get lashes. So besides for eating it in a state of impurity, you also can't eat it in mourning. Shenemar, because it says, Lo achalti v'oini mimenu. One of the declarations that the person makes is, I didn't eat it in a state of deep mourning. Which again, the statement tells you that it's forbidden. The same way by impurity you have to eat it in Jerusalem, so to over here, you only transgress the prohibition if you eat it in a place where it's supposed to be eaten, in Yerushalayim. But if you ate it outside of Yerushalayim, in a state of deep mourning, or you even ate it in Yerushalayim, but not in a state of deep mourning, only in what's called the rabbinic aninut, which we'll soon define in a second. You only get rabbinic lashes, not biblical. What's called a deep mourner? It's somebody who's in mourning over one of the relatives who you're obligated to mourn. Son, daughter, father, mother, spouse, brother, sister. So we're going to take the Rambam's words simply here. On the day of death, you're a biblical oinen, a biblical mourner. Once the night comes, after that day sets, you're only a rabbinic oinen. Shanemar, how do we know that it's only on the day of death? It says in the Pasuk, when the Mishkan was inaugurated, so on the same day, it was a very tragic event, Nadav and Avihu, Aaron's two sons, died. And there was a point at which Moshe Rabbeinu got upset. How come Aaron didn't eat some of the sacrifices that were brought that day? And Aaron said, he protested, he said, Ve'achalti chatas hayom, hayitav be'enei Hashem. If I eat the sin offering today, is it good in the eyes of Hashem? I'm a deep mourner. I'm on the day of death. My children just died. So from the fact that he said, would Hashem like it if I ate it? That shows you that it's no good. And it's that day that you're oinen. He used the word hayom. Today, hayom asur v'layla muter. By day it's forbidden. The next night it's permitted. That's how it usually works. The day of death is the biblical aninus. The night afterwards is not. Nishtaha hameis yamim rabim ve'achar kach nikbar. What if the dead person, the person who passed away, was delayed a couple of days, only buried later? Kol oisan hayamim she'achar yom hamisa ad yom hakvura hu einin midivrayim. So the rabbinic state of aninus keeps on going for all the days until he's actually buried. The ein yom hakvura toifes leile. And in the end of the day, whenever you're going to bury him, that day doesn't grab the night following it. No, the night following it is already not. You're completely out of the state of being an einin, and you're a regular, what's called an avil, a regular mourner. Just an interesting anecdote. The Rebbe's mother passed away, Vav Tishrei, 1964, just between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. So Shiva was cut short, because whenever Yom Kippur interrupts the Shiva, so Shiva is over. So it was basically a 3-day Shiva. 7 Tishrei, 8 of Tishrei, 9 of Tishrei, which is Erev Yom Kippur. So it was a very busy time. Many people, many great rabbis came to visit the Rebbe at the time, and one of them was Rabbi Yossi Soloveitchik, Rabbi J.B. Soloveitchik, the head of YU. Now, when two great rabbis meet, they usually discuss Torah, even though it's Shiva and there's different limitations of what an aval can discuss, but they discussed different parts of Torah. So the Rebbe mentioned that the Rambam holds that biblical aninus, biblical state of deep mourning, only applies until the burial. And Rabbi Soloveitchik said, Rebbe, there's no such Rambam. That's how it's recorded in the diaries. No such Rambam. And the Rebbe said, there is such a Rambam. And Rabbi Soloveitchik couldn't recall it. Because if you look here in the Rambam says it's the whole day. The day of death, even if he's buried, the whole day he's an Einin. So he left, and later on, when we have the letter today, the Rebbe sent a letter to him to explain that it was actually the Rambam in his commentary to the Mishnah. In Pirush HaMishnayos, the Rambam says that a person is an Einin kol zman shaloi nikbar, so long as the person wasn't buried. And the Rebbe also sent a follow-up letter to a great rabbi in Israel, Rabbi Zevin, who wrote what's called the Encyclopedia Talmudis. It's like a Talmudic encyclopedia. And he asked Rabbi Zevin, how come he didn't include that opinion of the Rambam among the opinions of when Aninus goes to? He should have mentioned the Rambam in the commentary to the Mishnah that it goes till the burial. So Rabbi Zevin said that we have in our possession a handwritten copy of the Rambam's commentary to the Mishnah where he crossed out that line. So because he crossed out that line, we didn't feel that it was...
But we do have handwritten...
Oh yeah. Yeah, we have Kitvei Yad from the Rambam. So
Where are they now?
in different libraries, you can find them. Huh? Oh, yeah. In the print it's there. So the Rebbe wrote back, that's not a reason to take out the opinion of the Rambam.
In Hebrew or Arabic?
Huh? Pirush HaMishnah was in Arabic.
In Arabic?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It won't do any good to me.
No, or to me. But the Rebbe wrote back that it's not a reason to take it out. If all the commentaries to the Mishnah as we have them today are printed with this line, that means that even in the Rambam's times, there was definitely a time period when he held that that was the opinion. And later on, he changed his mind. And then the Rebbe writes that it's his opinion that the Rambam, even here, in the Yad HaChazaka, also believes that when it comes to Maaser Sheini at least, you're only an Einin until the time of burial. Even though the Rambam writes Ubiyem Hamisa, that's because you're going to see in the next halacha the Rambam refers to korbanot. Korbanot, it's for sure all day. That's the whole source of it. Aaron HaKohen said about korbanot, about sacrifices. But Maaser Sheini, it's the Rambam's opinion in the Yad HaChazaka that it's only until Kvura. So that's an interesting tidbit of information. Halacha Zayin. V'loi Maaser Sheini bilvat. Not just the second tithe is forbidden to be eaten when you're an Einin. Ela kol HaKadashim kulam. Any sacrificial meat. Im achlan ba'aninos shel Torah. If you ate them in a biblical state of being an Einin, loike. You get lashes. U'ba'aninos shel divrei and makinese makas mardos. Rabbinic aninos, you get rabbinic lashes. Okay. Now look how far this law of impurity goes. Halacha ches, ein noisnin peiros Maaser Sheini la'am ha'aretz. You cannot give Maaser Sheini produce to a Jew who's not careful with the laws of tithing. V'loi peiros hanil koches b'ma'os Maaser. Nor can you give produce that's been bought with Maaser Sheini money. V'loi ma'os Maaser, nor Maaser Sheini money themselves. You can't give it to an unlearned Jew. Why? Mipnei shu b'chezkas tumah. Unlearned Jews who were not particular with the law could be presumed to be impure, and they would end up eating it in an impure state. If the whole Maaser Sheini produce came from questionable produce, it came from demai, that you could eat even in a biblical state of mourning. And you can even give it to an unlearned Jew. So long as you eat opposite it. Eat opposite it means that even if you give it away, in your own house, you have to put aside some fruit that's the same worth and treat it like Maaser Sheini. It's a special law, so we're a little bit lenient but a little bit strict.
What does it do with the negdo?
No, Kenegdo, which means opposite the value.
Okay.
Like you gave him $10, you have to eat it with him, exactly, yeah. Ein mafkidin Maaser Sheini afilu eitzel chaver. We never deposit Maaser Sheini even by a particular scrupulous Jew. Shema Yamos. Because the scrupulous Jew might die, and maybe he has a son who's not so religious, and the Maaser Sheini will pass to his estate, and it'll be a problem. But if, again, the whole Maaser Sheini is from questionable produce, then you can deposit it even by an unlearned Jew. Halacha test, now we're kind of segueing to move to the laws of how to consume Maaser Sheini. Maaser Sheini asur la'abed afilu mi'utay badrachim. When you travel to Jerusalem with your Maaser Sheini produce, you cannot destroy even the tiniest amount. By the way, this is why, if you have too much, you're supposed to redeem it, transfer it to money, so that you don't end up transgressing this law. But if you're transporting Maaser Sheini in a truck, you got to make sure either take it fully or take the money to Jerusalem. And if the Maaser Sheini is from questionable produce, then you could destroy a little bit on the road. The kama umiyot, how much is a little bit? Paches miki gregris, less than the size of a dried fig, tiny amount. Bein ba'echel shalem, bein beparos, whether it's complete food, chopped up food. Aval ki gregris ein ma'abdin. But once it's the size of a dried fig, you cannot destroy it actively. The hamafrish Maaser Sheini shel d'mai, paches miki gregris. Therefore, if somebody separates questionable Maaser Sheini, in other words, from questionable produce, and it's the size that's less than a fig, he didn't have so much produce, so 10% wasn't so much. You can give it to an unlearned Jew, eat other food corresponding to it, because less than a gregeres, less than a fig size, is not considered to be destroying. You cannot initially separate it with the intent to destroy it, because we don't separate Maaser Sheini just to destroy it. Halacha Yud. Maaser Sheini nitan la'achila u'shesiya. Let's talk about what Maaser Sheini can actually be used for. Maaser Sheini produce was meant to be eaten or to be drunk. Shenemar, as it says, ve'ochalta lifnei Hashem alekecha. You should eat it in front of Hashem your God. That's the way to consume it, is to eat it. V'sicha kishasiya. Anointing yourself with creams, using Maaser Sheini oil, let's say, is considered like drinking, and therefore it's allowed. However, it's forbidden to spend it on any other of even your own needs. For example, to buy household utensils, let's say cutlery, or clothing, or slaves. Shenemar, because it says, Lo nasati mimenu lemes. Part of the declaration that you make every couple of years when you talk about having fulfilled your tithing obligations, one of the things you say is, I didn't give it to a dead person, which literally sounds like you didn't spend it on funeral expenses, let's say. But the halachic interpretation of the verse is, this means to say, I didn't spend it on anything which doesn't serve directly to keep the body sustained. Has to be directly food, drink, or maybe a cream. But anything else is considered to having spent it on a dead body. However, if you did spend it on other things, even if you used it for a mitzvah, for example, you used it to buy a coffin or shrouds. For a mace mitzvah means an abandoned dead body. There's nobody to bury it. You discovered it on the road. It's a mitzvah for the first person who encounters it to bury it. So you would think you did a great mitzvah. You did the wrong thing. However, we can't give you biblical lashes because there's a way to fix it. You can eat corresponding to it. In other words, you could take other produce that equals the same value and treat that produce like Maaser Sheini and eat it in a higher state of holiness. And that's what you have to do. So ideally, you shouldn't spend it on anything else, but if you did, you just have some other things instead of it. Halacha Yud Aleph. Let's define eating, drinking, and smearing. Maaser, which in these halachas usually is referring to Maaser Sheini, oichel davar shadarke lehe ochel, v'sheisa davar shadarke lishtois, v'sach davar shadarke lasuch. You have to eat things that are normally eaten, drink things that are normally drunk, and smear things that are normally smeared. And therefore, v'lo yasuch yayin v'chayim, you shouldn't smear wine and vinegar. Nobody smears that, it's not normal. Avol sachu es Hashem, but you could smear oil. Oil is okay. V'lo yischad es hapeiros lahitzi mehen mashkin. Also, in order to be considered normal eating, you cannot squeeze fruits to get out their juice. You have Maaser Sheini oranges, you can't squeeze it. Chutz mizeisim va'anavim bilvad, except for olives and grapes. That's normal. Olives you squeeze into oil, grapes you squeeze into wine. Any other fruits should not be squeezed into juices. Ve'in mefat minas hashemen, neither should you spice oil. You wanted to make it a little more fragrant, so you'd put spices into it, but it causes it to depreciate because less people will use it. Not allowed. Aval mefat minas hayayin, but you could spice up wine. They would put in herbs also to make it more fragrant, and apparently in those days this was considered a delicacy. More people would actually want in on the wine if you did that, so it's allowed. We don't obligate a person to eat Maaser Sheini bread that's gone moldy or oil that's become smelly. Rather, once it's been disqualified from human consumption, the holiness is revoked, it leaves it, and there's no obligation to kind of eat the Maaser Sheini, all the way down to the dying breath. Normally, you have to eat it in the way that it's normally eaten. Once it's moldy, it's not normally eaten. Halacha Yud Beis says the Rambam a general rule about Maaser Sheini. Kol shemutar lezarim la'achlei betruma. Any part of the truma, which is the 2% reserved for the Kohen, that could be eaten by a non-Kohen. Remember in the laws of truma, there was a whole lengthy section of the laws where we talked about how truma can only be consumed by a Kohen, not by a non-Kohen, but there were certain parts of the truma, let's say the inedible parts of a plant or whatever it is, certain parts of the plant that weren't normally eaten, even a non-Kohen could eat them. So any part of the truma that a non-Kohen can eat, kach mutar b'Maaser Sheini la'achlei b'teiras cholin. So too, when it comes to Maaser Sheini produce, you can take that part of the produce and treat it as if it's regular produce. You don't have to eat it with all the holy laws of Maaser Sheini. Shmarim shel Maaser Sheini shenasan aleihem mayim, dregs, wine sediment of Maaser Sheini wine that you poured water over it. That was customary to do. They would pour water over this wine remnants to get a little bit of a winey substance liquid. So if you poured water over Maaser Sheini dregs, Rishain Asur Kemaiser, the first round, whatever you produce from the first round of the pouring, there's a significant amount of wine mixed into there, and therefore it's forbidden like Maaser Sheini. Forbidden meaning not that you can't eat it, forbidden meaning that it's limited by the laws of Maaser Sheini. You have to eat it in the way that you would eat Maaser Sheini. V'Sheini mutar kechulin, but the second round, if you pour more water over the dregs, Now, it's an insignificant amount of wine in the mixture. You don't have to eat. It's mutar kechulin. It's permitted like regular produce. V'shel demai, if the Maaser Sheini had come from demai, from questionable produce, afilu rishen mutar, since the whole Maaser Sheini is being removed out of doubt, so we're more lenient over here. Even the first round of water poured over the dregs is permitted like regular chulin. Halacha Yud Gimel. Yayin shel Maaser shenafal l'soichei dvash v'tavlin. We're going to begin to deal now with mixtures of Maaser Sheini and other produce. So we begin with the following case. You have Maaser Sheini wine into which honey fell. This is honey falling into wine or spices. Okay? V'hishbichu, and they enhanced the wine. So kind of the regular produce is enhancing the Maaser Sheini stuff. Hashvach lefi cheshbon. The enhancement, the additional value is divided proportionally between Maaser Sheini and not Maaser Sheini, as the Rambam will define in a moment. V'chein dagim shenizbashlu im kafloites shel Maaser Sheini. V'hishbichu, same thing if fish, regular fish, had been cooked with Maaser Sheini kafloites. Kafloites are loosely translated as leeks. They're more specifically this species called Purum capitatum in Latin. And similar concept here, you have a mixture, fish and leeks. Maaser Sheini leeks, v'hishbichu. And the leeks enhanced the fish. Now the total value of the dish is greater than the sum of its parts. Hashvach lefi cheshbon. So here too, the additional improvement is divided equally, proportionally. And we'll soon define again what that means. On the other hand, Isa shel Maaser Sheini, sha'afa v'hishbicha. If you have Maaser Sheini dough, and nothing got mixed, you simply put it into an oven, and the wood, as the Rambam explains it elsewhere, the wood was just ordinary firewood. And now through the baking process, the dough v'hishbicha has improved. Hashvach l'sheni. The entirety of the improvement belongs to Maaser Sheini. Zeh haklal, for this is the guiding principle. Kol sheshivchai nikar. Any time where the improvement in the dish is obvious, in the taste of the produce, the taste, you can taste what's been added by the mixture. Im hoyser b'mida hashvach lefi cheshbon. If, besides for the improvement, there's an increase in volume, then the improvement is divided proportionally. And if there's no additional volume, then the entire improvement belongs to Maaser Sheini. That's all if the improvement is obvious. If the improvement is not obvious, even if the additional mixed in substance has added to the volume of the mixture, the improvement belongs only to the Maaser Sheini. And there's a huge debate over here that Rambam seems to be completely misquoting the Talmud Yerushalmi, which is the source. The Rabbi here goes to town, arguing on the Rambam. Many resolutions have been offered in the Rambam's favor. We're not getting into it, just to know that this last two lines is a source of big controversy in the Rambam. At any rate, we see two types of improvements. Sometimes the improvements are divided proportionally. Sometimes they're divided, or they're totally ascribed to Maaser Sheini. Ketzad hashvach lefi cheshbon. What would it mean to say that the improvement is divided proportionally? So the Rambam uses the above example of the wine and the honey. You have yayin shel Maaser sheshave shleisha, shenafal l'soichei dvash v'tavlin shave zuz echad. So follow the case, please. You have Maaser Sheini wine, an amount that's worth 3 coins. Into the wine falls regular, not Maaser Sheini, regular honey and spices that are worth 1 coin. So in terms of value, there's a ratio of 3 to 1. Now, in total, this honey and spices that's fallen into the wine has, number 1, added to the volume. Number 2, it's enhanced the flavor and the value of the total mixture. And now the entirety of the dish is worth 5 coins. So you put in 3 coins worth of wine, 1 coin worth of honey and spices, and now you're out with 5 coins. How do you divide the improvement? There's an improvement, a net improvement of 1 coin's worth. So the Rambam says, and I'm going to go now with the text as it's emended by the Radvaz. This is the more classic way to understand it. Choshvin hakoil be'arba pachos revia. I know some texts say barba urevia. We're going to first go with the text that says barba pachos revia. We calculate the entirety of the mixture as containing 4 minus a quarter of Maaser Sheini. That means in total, of the 5, you're going to consider 3 3/4 Maaser Sheini, 1 1/4 regular. And this is a simple the most simple conclusion. Because if you have 3 coins worth of wine, 1 coin worth of honey, that means that the initial ratio was 3-1. So the profit should also be divided 3-1. 3/4 of the coin goes to Maaser Sheini, 1/4 goes to the other side. And the commentaries discuss the basic ramification would be if it's owned by one person, how much does he have to treat as Maaser Sheini? Maybe the mixture was owned by 2 people, maybe the honey and spices belong to somebody else, and the point is this guy walks away with 3 3/4, which he treats as Maaser Sheini. This guy walks away with 1 1/4, which he treats as regular produce. The point is, because you have a 3-1 ratio, the profit or the improvement is divided proportionally. Now, other texts in the Rambam say, 4 plus a quarter, which doesn't seem to make sense. If the literal meaning of this is that you would put 4 1/4 on the side of Maaser Sheini, that means that Maaser Sheini is walking away with not just the extra coin of profit, it's taking a quarter away from the regular grain, which makes no sense. So the Kesef Mishnah explains that if we want to keep this text, it's going to be essentially saying the same message. We're just going to reinterpret it. Choshvin hakel barbo revia means we consider the value of the entire mixture as 4 1/4. In other words, we ignore 3/4 of the coin of profit. That automatically goes to the Maaser Sheini money. Instead, we consider the mixture to be containing 4 1/4, of which Maaser Sheini grabs away its original 3, plus the 3/4 which we ignored, again for a total of 3 3/4, and the regular stuff walks away with 1 1/4. So either way you explain the Rambam, it's always the same explanation. Question is which word you use, barba pachas revia, barba urevia. At any rate, the bottom line is in this scenario where it's a 3-1 ratio, the profit will also be divided 3-1, and Maaser Sheini will walk away with 3 3/4, the regular produce with 1 1/4. The Chen al derech zeh b'shar hadvarim, says the Rambam, the same thing applies in all similar scenarios where we're supposed to divide the improvement proportionally. Halacha tazayin Maaser Sheini, another law pertaining to Maaser Sheini. Afal pisha nitan l'sicha, even though it's allowed to be used as an anointment, as a smearing, ein nois neinoisa, we do not apply it loy al gabe tzinis v'loy al gabe chazazis, not onto a foot infection or onto a foot boil. So the picture on the right here is borrowed from the laws of Shabbat, when we learned back then, if you remember, that one of the things that a coin may or may not be used for is to be put as an amulet, type of healing substance, onto a foot infection. That's where the word tzinis comes up. So tzinis means the foot infection. Here, I'm just using the picture, but of course we're talking about oil. You would put Maaser Sheini oil onto this infection. Chazazis is on this side, more of a blister. The Rambam either way is saying that you cannot use Maaser Sheini oil for these things. We also cannot make it into an amulet of some sort. Maaser Sheini, while it's allowed to be smeared, it's a luxurious type of smearing, not a medicinal type of smearing. Halacha Yud Zayin, says the Rambam, a very important rule to remember. Maaser Sheini mamoin gavoyahu. Maaser Sheini is really the property of the Most High. It's Hashem's stuff. It doesn't belong to you. Shenemar, as it says also in yesterday's Torah reading, La Hashem hu. Maaser is considered God's. Lefichach, therefore, we're not supposed to do any other type of transactions with it. Einei nikne b'matana. It cannot be acquired as a present. If you separate Maaser Sheini from your property, you have it here in your hands and you want to give it to somebody else as a present, it doesn't work. Not an effective present. Unless you gave away the untithed produce and the guy then tithed it, that's fine. But once the Maaser Sheini has been designated, no giving it as a gift. You can't use it for kiddushin. The husband has to use his own stuff to consecrate his wife. You can't use Maaser Sheini produce. If you remember from the laws of marriage, even if you did, it's not effective. Sometimes you shouldn't use something, and if you did, it's effective. Here, even after the fact, not effective. You can't sell Maaser Sheini money. No, you can't make money off of God's money. You cannot forcefully take it as collateral, even though sometimes a creditor is allowed to go to a borrower's home and get a mashka and get collateral. He cannot take Maaser Sheini as security. You also can't exchange it. The Rambam will define what this means. And you cannot deposit it as a willful collateral. The Rambam will soon define what this means. Basically, you go to a guy and you say, let me borrow money, and you offer the security. And I'll put in your house a box of Maaser Sheini produce. In other words, you're kind of using it as the security. Also not allowed. Says the Rambam, what does it mean you don't take it as collateral? Lo yikonis lebeisai. As a creditor, you cannot go into the borrower's house and take as collateral his Maaser Sheini. avaru mishkanai, to the point that if you transgressed and took it as collateral, moitzi naisim yad, they would take it out of your hands. Ketzad ein marhini naisei. What does it mean you don't deposit it as a willful collateral? Lo yoymar lo, you should not tell a friend, hey lecha meiser zeh, here's this Maaser Sheini, v'yiyeh biyadcha, let it be in your hands, v'tein li olav mois, and in exchange, give me money as a loan. Not allowed. Ketzad ein machlifin. I say, what does it mean you don't exchange Maaser Sheini? Lo yoymar lo, you should not tell a friend, hey lecha yayin meiser, v'tein li shemen meiser. Here's some Maaser Sheini wine, give me please in exchange Maaser Sheini oil. That's not allowed. It's like a kind of a sale, kind of a transaction. What you could do, there's a little bit of a workaround. Aval oimer lo, you can tell a friend, hey lecha yayin she'ein li shemen. Here, take some of my Maaser Sheini wine because I don't have any Maaser Sheini oil. In other words, you notify him the problem. Kind of like a Shabbos guy, right, where you're not allowed to tell a non-Jew to do work for you outright. But you can tell them the problem in many cases and they can solve it for you. So you tell your friend, here's Maaser Sheini wine, I don't have any oil. If the friend wants to give you oil, if he gets the cue, mutter, that's allowed. You didn't exchange it with him, you simply let him know, you notified him that you don't have. That guy wants to give, let him give. Halacha yutes, here's a related law. Maaser Sheini produce, ein shoiklin kenegdoi, afilu dinrei zahav. You cannot use it as a counterweight, even for gold coins. You don't put it on one side of the scale to figure out how much your gold coins weigh. Let's say you know how much the produce weighs, and you want to put on gold coins to see, how much it is. Even if you want to use these coins for a noble purpose, you want to use it to transfer the holiness of other Maaser Sheini onto them. So you're using Maaser Sheini produce to weigh coins so that you can use those coins to transfer other produce. Why not? Gzeira, it's a decree. And here also we have a difference in text. I'm going to begin with the text the way it's probably by you in the Rambam Frankel. Shema yechavin mimenu mishkalos. Perhaps you're going to use this weight to define weights for the future. In other words, if you begin with the premise that you know how much the Maaser Sheini produce weighs, and you're kind of using that as a point of reference to figure out how much other things weigh, you might begin to use that systematically. You're going to align your weight to what you know about this Maaser Sheini produce. And it's very likely that the produce will go down in volume as it dries out. Sometimes bugs can get a hold of it, as the commentaries here point out. And meanwhile, you're keeping on to weigh money against it to transfer the worth of other produce onto it. You're going to be extracting, you're going to be transferring Maaser to Chulin at less than its worth. Because let's say the initial batch of produce weighs 5 pounds. So in your head you think whatever coins I put up here comes out to 5 pounds of gold. But really, over time, it's gone down to 4 pounds. And so when you're going to put up the coins, you're going to only have 4 pounds of coins, but you're going to think it's 5 pounds. So you're going to transfer 5 pounds worth of produce into those 4 pounds of coins, transferring Maaser to Chulin for less than its worth. That's a problem. Therefore, we never use Maaser Sheini as the initial weight. Now that's the standard text. In other texts, as I have it in this book here, it says Gzeira Shema lo yechavin mimenu mishkalei. Not Gzeira Shema yechavin, Gzeira Shema lo yechavin mimenu mishkalei. And this also seems to be one of the adopted texts in the Talmud. Also, the point is the same. In this case, the interpretation would be, perhaps you're not going to end up having the proper weight. Why? For the same reason. Because it's going to come out that the produce is going to be lacking, they're going to go down in volume, etc., etc. You're going to end up using Maaser in the wrong way. So whether it's Shema Yechavin, Shema Lo Yechavin, like with the other variant in text, the interpretation is the same, just how you got there. Either you're not going to align it properly because they're going to go down, or you're going to think you're aligning it properly and really it's going down. Again, point is the same. Halacha Chaf, Ha'achim shecholku Maaser Sheini. Brothers are dividing an estate of their father, and they're dividing Maaser Sheini among the property. Ein shoiklin zeh keneged zeh. They shouldn't weigh each other against each other. You can't use Maaser Sheini in a weight. V'chein ma'os Maaser Sheini. Also, the money of Maaser Sheini. Ein shoiklin kenegdam. They can't be used for a weight. Ve'ein moichrin oisam. You can't sell them. Ve'ein machlifin. You can't exchange them. Ve'ein lemarhinin. You can't use them as a willful collateral. V'lo yitneim lashulchan li hisnayis b'han. You shouldn't even give them to a money changer to create an impression with them, to look good. And the more money you have on the desk, the richer or the more fancy you look as a currency guy. You can't use Maaser Sheini money as as a stage prop. You shouldn't lend them also to make yourself look big. People used to do that in those days. A wealthy person, the way he would show that he's wealthy is he'd make a big loan. Meanwhile, the guy would just return it to him right away, and he would look like he's a rich man. You cannot lend Maaser Sheini money as part of that performance. If you simply lent the money so they'd be in use, in circulation, and they won't rust, that's okay. You're taking care of the Maaser money. You're not trying to serve yourself with it. You cannot use Maaser Sheini money to pay back a debt. You cannot use them for a marriage gift. We'll see in the Rambam's 12th book, this was a common custom in those days, that when somebody got married, his friend would give him a monetary donation towards the wedding expenses, and then when the other friend got married, it was expected that the original friend should return that payment in exchange. You can't use Maaser Sheini money to repay shushvinus. You can't repay other types of favors. Person invites you to a meal, again, there's an expectation you're going to invite him back, you can't use Maaser Sheini money for that. You cannot pledge tzedakah based on them. You're taking part in an auction, they're selling. Yesterday was Chazak, right? They sell the aliyah of Chazak. You have X amount of money in your bank account, but you also have some Maaser Sheini money. So you figure I'll bid using that money. Not allowed, even for tzedakah. Avol, and here we have another difference in text. Again, same meaning. Some of you might have mishal min, others might have mishal chin. We'll read first what I have here. Mishal min mehen dvarim shein gemilas chasadim. You can pay back matters that are just like charitable gifts. They're not an expected payback type of a thing. You could just use it to pay back a charitable gift. Or mishal chin. You can use it to send a gift of just a simple favor. However, you have to notify the recipient that you're sending him Maaser Sheini material. Halacha chav beis. Here's another element of not using Maaser Sheini money in sale or produce. A person shouldn't tell a friend, look, I have a bunch of pounds of Maaser Sheini I got to get to Jerusalem. I don't have a truck, you have a truck. Please, can you bring up this produce to Jerusalem and take your payment from the produce? Not allowed. The truck driver will turn out to be taking payment from Maaser Sheini money for bringing it to Jerusalem. But again, there's a workaround here. The guy can say, Halem shenoichlem b'shanishtem b'Yerushalayim. Please bring them up to Jerusalem. We'll eat and drink them together in Jerusalem. We'll have a good lunch out of it. So you're not saying take your payment. You're saying we'll eat together. So you're not mentioning specifically it's going to be a type of a sale mechanism. That's allowed. A person can tell his friend in Jerusalem, to please anoint him with Maaser Sheini oil. Even though the guy who's going to do the anointing will end up getting oil on his hand. Or that's not considered like the payment for his anointing. It's an insignificant amount. We already explained that Maaser Sheini is the money of the Most High. It's God's possessions. And even though in the last couple of halachot that turns into a stringency, here it also turns into a leniency. Therefore we say, if somebody steals Maaser Sheini, which usually would obligate you to pay it back plus double, you don't have to pay back double payment because you didn't steal from a person, you stole from Hashem. If you rob it in broad daylight, where you usually have to give back the principal plus a fifth, no extra fifth needs to be added because again, you're stealing Hashem's money. If somebody consecrates his Maaser Sheini to the temple upkeep treasury fund. So we know from the last book that when you redeem hekdesh, when you redeem something you've consecrated, you have to add a fifth. When you redeem Maaser Sheini, you're also, if it's yours, you're supposed to add a fifth. So the Rambam mentions the concept, and we're going to expand on it tomorrow. Whoever redeems it needs to have in mind, he needs to redeem it al menas with the condition liten la hekdesh es shaloi or la Maaser Sheini es shaloi, to give hekdesh what it belongs, or what it deserves, what's coming to it, and to give Maaser Sheini the part that's coming to it. In other words, when you redeem it, even though you're redeeming a mixture of holy and Maaser Sheini, in your head you have to divide them. I'm redeeming this with the express intention that what's hekdesh is getting its part and Maaser Sheini is getting its part.